Okay, I think we're live. Urban, can you see my screen?
Yes, I think I can.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining the call here. I'm sure we'll have a few more people trickling in over the next couple of minutes, but I want to say welcome, and we're extremely excited to have all of you who are joining the hackathon as hackers, but also all of you from the general Polkadot and Kusama ecosystem to be here to kind of watch the start of this hackathon and to join us for the first session and the next 7 weeks of sessions that we'll have going for Hackusama here. Today we'll be going over quite a few things. First, starting with a little bit of an introduction on what Kusama is and its relation to Polkadot. Then we'll go through a lot of details related to the hackathon itself. So going through timelines, prizes, who the judges are, and then Urban will walk you through some things like just important resources to keep in mind, some important rules to keep in mind. And then we'll hand it over to Bruno and Kirsten, who will walk you through kind of some more information on Kusama and Substrate. So just a quick introduction to the four of us. So I'm Dan Reeser. I'm on the growth and community team here at the Web3 Foundation. I'm based in the US and primarily focus on Polkadot and Kusama community and growth. Urban, do you want to give a quick intro to yourself?
Yeah, for sure. Thanks, Dan. So I work alongside Dan on the community growth side of things, and just very excited to be here. This hackathon has been a really good wild ride since we kicked it off on Monday, and it's it's good to kick off the webinar series as well.
I think Hutch just told me that the screen sharing is not working. 1 second. Let's try this.
Yeah, there we go.
So now if I make this, is this better? Anybody? Okay, sweet. Well, sorry about that. Let's get back into this. So like I mentioned, Bruno and Kirsten are actually going to be following up after Urban's section. So they'll be describing more around Substrate and around Kusama, just to give you a little bit more of the technical background of these two networks and tools. So to get started, what is Kusama? So in general, Kusama is a multi-chain network, just like Polkadot, for people who want to leverage the fast governance within Kusama and build and innovate on this network, or people who want to prepare for their deployments on Polkadot's network as well. This image here is really meant to, you've probably seen this from Polkadot, it's really meant to give you a visual of what these networks are. Throughout this hackathon, we'll be referring to things like the relay chain, which is this kind of gray circle here in the middle, which is basically kind of the connective core of the network that brings all these different chains together. And then these little gray squares here, you can think of these as individual blockchains. So throughout this hackathon, one of the challenges will be for people to build custom blockchains. Right now, we're waiting on a piece of tech called Cumulus to be completed. And once that's finished, then any of these custom blockchains built with Substrate will then be able to plug into the relay chain of Kusama or of Polkadot, depending on what the team chooses. You've probably seen the canary bird, the logo for Kusama. This really comes from the fact that Kusama is meant to be kind of a canary in the coal mine for Polkadot. So people, like the use case that I just mentioned, where people would come to Kusama to build out their application or even their blockchain to kind of fine tune things before moving to Polkadot. That's kind of the background and the canary logo for Kusama. Kusama and Polkadot, as you probably know, were both founded by Dr. Gavin Wood. Gavin was the former co-founder and CTO at Ethereum, and then post Ethereum came and founded the Web3 Foundation, and Parity, which kind of work hand in hand to foster the building and the growth of Kusama and Polkadot, and they work a lot on the Substrate framework itself as well. So let's get into Hackusama. We're really excited to kick this off. This is the first of many hackathons that you're going to be seeing over the coming years. This is going to be kind of our first run at this. We've already had a huge response from the community, from developers, from teams within the ecosystem, a lot of excitement to kind of get things going and get our first hackathon launched here. The timeline of the hackathon obviously just kicked off on Monday. We're going to be running this for about 7 weeks. So Friday, August 14th will be the final day that submissions are due. And the day after that is when judging will start. So there's about 12 days of judging for judges to either go through, the blockchains that are submitted or anything in the open hack category, which I'll get to in a second. And then on Friday, August 28th, will be when the winners are announced, prizes begin being sent out, and so on. So webinars, as we're doing right now, this is actually a Friday, but every Thursday from now on, there will be webinars coming from different community partners that are involved in the hackathon, some judges that are involved, and then a lot of Parity or Web3 people will be giving presentations on different topics relative to the hackathon. And then office hours, it's mentioned here. We're kind of plugging into an existing call or an existing group that meets weekly. This is called Substrate Seminar. Substrate Seminar takes place every Tuesday, and you can find that in the Hacker Guide as part of the hackathon. So they'll be able to give a quick presentation on any given topic during that office hours, and then they're going to dedicate some time to Q&A for people to come and ask their questions to help with their Hackusama projects. So as of about 5 minutes ago, we have around, I think, 237 hackers that are participating so far, and they keep trickling in every minute, it seems. So we're really excited about the uptick in the numbers here. A lot of teams already forming, a lot of excellent ideas already being proposed. Although we have a lot of teams already being formed, there's also a good amount of people who have not yet found a team or are still looking for teammates. So if you are one of those people, go to your kind of profile on the dev post page under participants and make sure you tick the box that says you're looking for a team. And if you are a team, maybe of 1 or 2, and you're looking to bring on a couple more people with certain skill sets, also go to this participants tab, and you can even filter by people based on different programming languages they might know or different skill sets they might have. In addition to the dev post UI itself, you can also go to the Kusama Telegram, or you can either go to the Kusama forum and kind of post a topic about what you're looking to contribute to a team. And so there's a few ways now to look for a team and kind of explain to people what you bring to the table. So the two categories of the hackathon kind of split 50-50 in terms of prizes are one that I've mentioned, build a blockchain. So this is building a custom application specific blockchain using Substrate, which will then be able to connect in to the relay chains of Polkadot or Kusama. You'll see in the hacker guide that we created, there's a lot of really good kind of examples for what these chains could look like. You can look at existing Substrate chains as examples, like from within the ecosystem that are already kind of built. And we've provided some of those links, but in addition to that, we've also given you a lot of examples of like a gaming chain or a privacy chain and what this really means, and kind of helping to get your kind of ideas flowing on those. And then on the other side, the open hack is exactly what it says. It's completely open-ended. So whatever you think would be a valuable tool or a really cool visualization, even getting into kind of governance tools or staking tools, and then to other ideas such as building RPC clients, even transpilers for programming languages. But it's completely up to you what you want to build here. And like I mentioned, are split equally between these two sides. So prizes, in addition to the 30K that's split equally, we also are offering kind of a slew of other advantages for teams who are able to get top 3 places in the hackathon. So the first one you'll see here is an expedited pitch session for Substrate Builders program. This is a program that's being facilitated by Parity from their team based in Berlin. And the Substrate Builders program is really meant to help foster these new projects in the ecosystem. Right now, mostly substrate chains, but they're offering everything from technical help to community building to really everything on the full spectrum of what a successful project needs in order to to get to the point of adoption in the ecosystem. In addition to Substrate Builders, on the Web3 side, there's we're going to be giving you kind of a fast track as well to speaking with our Web3 group, Web3 Foundation grants team around the 2 different types of grants that are being offered. The open grants that are kind of in the 30K range, and then the kind of full-on Web3 Foundation grants that range up to 100K. So we'll help get you to conversations with that team and discussing if a grant makes sense for this project in order to take it to kind of the next step. Ledger also, so thanks to Ledger for helping sponsor this hackathon. They're going to be giving away devices to teams. So based on first or second place, we're giving out some Nano X's and S devices. And I think we'll have an image of that in a second of what those actually look like. They're pretty. So consultation with Web3 and Parity developers. So we're going to give teams, I believe, of time with developers in order to project to the next step again. And then Polkadot and Kusama swag, features in all of our kind of Hackusama follow-up social media posts, just highlighting projects, where you're from, built. So that kind of wraps up the prizes that we're offering. On the judge side, there's a lot of around. I won't go through everyone to these judges who agreed to participate in the hackathon. A lot of these guys and girls are very involved in the ecosystem already with their own projects. So thanks for all the work that you've already done up to this point. And we'll be doing some kind of highlighting of these judges, and some of them, like I mentioned, will be speaking in some of the webinars over the next 6 weeks. So the Hacker Guide is probably one of the most important resources that you should keep your eye on throughout the hackathon. You'll find this on the Hacker Guide tab within the dev post page, and you can actually download this as a PDF if that's easier for you to just keep on your desktop throughout the hackathon. The Hacker Guide is where we go through all the different ideas in the blockchains category and in the open hack category, and provide you all the different communications channels, different links to where to get started with Substrate, learning about Kusama and Polkadot, basically everything that you would need to know to build a project for this hackathon. Now I'll hand it over to Urban to take you through the next details around rules and criteria, submission criteria, and things like that. So take it away, Urban.
So thank you very much, Dan. Continuing from the Hacker Guide, there's essentially 2 pieces of resources or documents that come together to form this nice view of the whole hackathon. One is, as Dan mentioned, the Hacker Guide. We've got all these resources, ideas, schedules, and so on. But the other important piece are the rules. So please read the rules. It's really important. You've got details in there about submissions, judging criteria, applications, what to submit, what not to submit, and so on. So please read the rules. We're not going to go into all the specifics that are laid out in the rules, but I do want to highlight stuff that is really important, like, for instance, the judging criteria. So we've got 4 different criteria. They're equally weighted, but it's really here to guide you when you choose a submission, when you choose a project to build on, how to modify it, how to make it better so that you have better chances at winning. So contribution to decentralization and Web3, friendliness, originality, creativity, and innovation, technical difficulty, and user experience. So these all make sort of a 100% that you can get, and it's equally split amongst the 4. So then if you go to the next one. There you go. So submission criteria. I know this is a long slide, and there's actually a second slide to it. I do want to guide you through some of these submission requirements because it is really important. We don't want you to spend a lot of time building something and then not following the submission requirements and not being eligible for a prize. So it's actually really, really important. I'm going to try to go through as fast as possible, but it is a critical piece of information that we do want to transmit here. So the number one, submission must be one of the following formats. So please keep in mind that especially the first one here is more of a submission requirement on the blockchain side. So if you build a custom blockchain, this is geared towards you. So we'd love to see a live running site or running chain and provide an endpoint if you're running a Substrate chain. So this option is highly recommended. And it's highly recommended because Substrate chains do take some time to compile, and we want to go easy on our judges. You don't want to have 100 submissions, and each one compiles a few hours. Our judges might not even finish within the 12 days. So this is really, really highly recommended. You can alternatively choose also to submit a Docker image, which is also a good option. Less good options are a Linux executable or just plain code with detailed build instructions. So this is something that we definitely consider, but it's not the ideal way of submitting it. So if you start a fresh Substrate project, please use RC3 or later, preferably RC4. Now, the second part to this is if you build on an existing project or existing work, participants are permitted to use another version. We're going to get back to this, but just so that you know that RC3 or later is what we prefer. Now, when you submit something, it preferably also has a README file to it. That is because we'd like to see a project title and a description. Now, often we'd sometimes get submissions in other projects and small bounties that we run without any description. So it's a bit hard for us to judge this. Please give us context, explain what you're doing. There's no need for long essays, long blocks, whatever. Just keep it above like 150 something words, and we're going to be very, very happy. Makers entering submissions that existed prior to the start of the submission period will be required to explain how their submission has been updated during the submission period. So this is also one of the things that you might go back to the rules and read more about it. But in a nutshell, we absolutely accept submissions that have been built prior, but you will only be judged on the parts that you have upgraded or built during the hackathon. So if you, for instance, built a Substrate chain before, we're not going to be judging what you've built before the hackathon, but only features and upgrades during the hackathon. So this is really important to keep it in mind, please. And obviously, the fourth one, register for the hackathon on the dev post page. You might have seen different kinds of promotion, marketing material, and so on going out from different channels. Please don't send us email. Please don't send, don't tweet the submission and us, which is obviously great, but just go through the official channels here. So then if you go to the next one, indicate which challenge you're competing in. Also really important, you can only compete at either the first or the second one. But importantly, you are always eligible for the community choice prize. So we do have the blockchain category, the open hack category, but there is also this community choice prize, which you're always eligible to receive. This number 7, please create a video. That video footage should explain your submission's features, functionalities, and preferably also have a demonstration. Now, this is really, really important because it makes judging easier if you guide us through what you've done, how it works, and provide a simple explanation on video as well. Provide a way to access the project for judging and testing, including a link to a repo hosting the application, and code and other deployment files and testing instructions. Again, it goes into the UX for our judges. Please make their lives easier. Provide links and provide instructions how to use what you submit. The submissions must have an open source license. This is just in the general Web3 spirit. We love to see anything connected to open source. Also outside of Hackusama, we do work on open source technology and projects. So this is a requirement here. And last but not least, submission must use or be made for the Kusama ecosystem. So please, keep in mind all the submissions must somehow touch the Kusama network or be either built upon it or for it. All right, then the next one. Now, again, coming back to the rules, there's a few specifics that do pop up that I just want to briefly mention. And again, if you go through the rules, you're gonna familiarize yourself with them by yourself. But just to be very clear, so participants must be adults. So either what is permitted in your country. Generally, this is over 18, the year of the participants. You must create a submission video. Now, we spoke about this on the previous slide. The submissions must be in English or translated to English. So as much as we love to work with Chinese communities and non-English speaking communities in general, we do have judges that are English speaking, so the official language here is English. So do please transmit or submit your projects in English, or at least translate them to English. The last one, winners will be subject to verification. So we do need to identify who you are so that we can reach out to you. We can send you swag and all the amazing prizes. On details, how that happens and the timelines and so on, do check out the rules. So then if we go on, to sum up this section, please read the rules. It's just really important. The hacker guide and the rules do form this cohesive whole, which makes it easier for you to participate in. So then if we move to the next slide. All right, so a more light topic. We do have community partners that have been working with us throughout the hackathon before, and probably going to be working with us after the hackathon as well. Not going to go through all of them here. We are going to be introducing some of them as we move along. But just we wanted to really thank everybody who's been involved, who's been helping out. We do appreciate the effort very much. And the idea here is to build communities, to connect communities. And that's why we do have all these amazing community partners. So if we go to the first one, we'd like to introduce Ledger. Ledger, like Dan mentioned, was kind enough to be not just a community partner, but actually sponsor some of these devices. And if you go to the next slide, this is something that they've sent us. These are renders of how engraved Ledger Nano S and Nano X are going to look like. So in my mind, they look pretty sweet. I'd like to get my hands on one of these. But just so that you know what we are giving out. The next community partner is the Berkeley Blockchain Accelerator. So we've been actually working with Berkeley on this for a while, and they have incubated a few of our Polkadot/Kusama projects. So we're very happy to have them on here. The Berkeley Blockchain Accelerator is actually a sort of joint effort between the Center for Entrepreneurship at the UC Berkeley of Engineering, then the blockchain at Berkeley, and also the Haas Business School at Berkeley. They do provide sort of non-dilutive support to their incubees, which is really cool for such an incubator. And we do absolutely look forward to working with Berkeley and the accelerator in the coming months and years. Last but not least is Longhash Ventures. Again, we've been working with Longhash on a few different things, and I'm very happy to see them as a community partner here. Thank you very much for all the support here. In a nutshell, Longhash is a global blockchain accelerator, so they focus solely on blockchain projects. And they're situated currently in Singapore, but also have outposts and offices in Shanghai and Hong Kong. They've got wonderful partners like Fubushi Capital, Hashkey Capital under the Wanxiang Group, as well as Enterprise Singapore. So just a really good partner to have on board. Now, then if you go on, there you go. So now we're going to hand it to Bruno and Kirsten, who are going to take a more technical stab, and Kusama and Substrate take you through some of the 101 topics. But I think it's really important to iterate on these just so that we all understand how all of these pieces of puzzles and Lego blocks fit together. So without further ado, Bruno, Kirsten, there you go.
All right, give us just 1 second.
All right, we're waiting for Kirsten to join. She's going to be giving you, there she is.
Hello.
Okay, so I'm going to let you just take it away, and then I'll handle the second part. Kirsten will give you a brief intro into everything on the Kusama and Polkadot front, and then I'll take care of the technical parts of Substrate and some other details. So enjoy, and Kirsten, take it away.
Sure. Just gonna share my screen here.
Got it.
So can everyone see my PowerPoint here? Okay,
Yep.
Cool. All right. So this is a little introduction to everything you need to know, just a brief overview of what Polkadot and Kusama is. So a little bit about me. My name's Kirsten. I'm a technical educator intern here at Web3 Foundation. I'm in Canada right now, and let's get started. All right, so what is Polkadot? Polkadot is a heterogeneous multi-chain that connects and secures blockchains with pooled security and interoperability. And what I mean by heterogeneous multi-chain is basically that any kind of blockchain, whether that be a public blockchain such as Bitcoin, or a private blockchain such as Hyperledger, or even other multi-chains like Cosmos, those can all work together despite being different kinds of blockchains in Polkadot. So in other words, Polkadot offers a space for different blockchains like Bitcoin and Ethereum to essentially talk to each other through this network. All right, so why Polkadot? Why use Polkadot? Once again, Polkadot allows for blockchains to communicate together in a secure, trust-free environment. Polkadot can be used to secure private and enterprise high-value blockchains through shared security. And some examples of projects that can be built on Polkadot are big financial applications or even large-scale gaming chains that have non-fungible tokens. So perhaps most importantly, though, Polkadot does not compete with other chains. It merely augments them. So any chain that connects to Polkadot has nothing to lose, only something to gain, whether that is new markets, uses, or even users. All right, so let's take a look now into Polkadot's architecture. I won't be going into too much depth on this because there's a lot of concept here. But I will say that the center of Polkadot is the relay chain, which is a blockchain. And this relay chain provides finality to chains, which we call parachains. And those parachains have their own full nodes called collators. And the role of a collator is to create blocks on the relay chain, and validators validate those blocks. Parachains can also send messages and assets and talk to each other through Polkadot's cross-chain message passing. And if you're very interested in learning more about this, I encourage you to go over to our Polkadot wiki page that will explain all of this into much more depth. On top of Polkadot's architecture, it also has a governance that takes place, which lets token holders decide the progress of the network. Polkadot also uses a nominated proof of stake system, which refers to how validators are selected for staking. And in that system, there are nominators and validators. And as we recall from the previous slide, validators validate blocks on the Polkadot network, and nominators, on the other hand, they are people that nominate these validators with stake. And essentially, this whole process is how Polkadot's nominated proof of stake system works. And again, if you check out our Polkadot wiki, this will be in much more depth on there in much more detail. So please check it out. All right. Now, this brings us to what is Kusama? Kusama is Polkadot's wild cousin, or in other words, a canary network for Polkadot. Another way to grasp the idea of Kusama is thinking of it as an alpha release of Polkadot, one that never goes out of date. Okay, so who is Kusama built for? Kusama is built for teams and developers who want to operate on the bleeding edge. Kusama is a great opportunity for those who want to experiment their products on advanced network, early stage startup networks, social experiments, and preparing for deployment on Polkadot. Whereas with Polkadot, it's more or less built for enterprises, B2B applications, large-scale financial banking application, and things like that. As you can hopefully tell, Kusama is more of this wild, edgier network, and whereas Polkadot is more conservative, much more serious sort of network. So one of the things that Kusama has actually built for its developers is a secret cyber society, where it's essentially an economic game to incentivize users to join and create whatever rules are decided. So that's just one of the things that Kusama offers if you take part in it. Okay. So some key features of Kusama. The first is that it offers fast iterations for developers and hackers. If you didn't know, Kusama runs 4 times faster than Polkadot. This means that builders can quickly develop their blockchains on Kusama without much hassle. Kusama also allows for rapid on-chain governance that supports community decisions about the future of the infrastructure, as well as advanced technology that hasn't yet been deployed on Polkadot. And these are just 3 features that Kusama offers. There's many more if you check out the Kusama network page. Okay. And this brings us to what can you build with Kusama? So anyone can build anything on Kusama. And in fact, one of the best ways to get involved in the Kusama ecosystem is to just try out a project, experiment with it, just build it. With the Kusama network, you can build anything from DAOs, such as Moloch DAO. You can build games such as CryptoKitties, even decentralized social networks such as Subsocial, just about anything project-based. And actually right now, as one of my tasks, I'm working on creating a Moloch DAO using Substrate. And in the past, I've also built a front-end Vue.js component with Polkadot. So those are just a little taste of what you can build with Polkadot and Kusama. And if you check out this link that's listed right here on this page, it will take you to a full list of resources available for building with Kusama. And that's it from me. I'm going to pass it on to Bruno right now.
Hey, thank you, Kirsten. Okay, so this was a high-level overview of what Polkadot and Kusama are for. So now I'm going to take you through some more technical parts of it, and I'm going to explain the framework that these chains are built on. So Kirsten, if you could turn off your cam so I can get a full screen. Thank you. Let me just figure out how to share my screen here. Okay. Okay, here we go. All right.
Looks good.
All right, thank you, Dan. Okay, so I am Bruno. I'm the technical educator at Web2 Foundation. You can always reach me on Twitter, Telegram, LinkedIn, whatever else. I previously worked on Ethereum 2.0, and now I work here in this wonderful ecosystem, trying to make amazing things happen between different blockchains. So I'm going to tell you about Substrate. And Substrate is a framework on which Polkadot and Kusama are both built, and which you would probably be using to create your own blockchains for this hackathon. So this is a framework that you want to use to create your own custom blockchain. But how did it come to be, and why does it exist? Well, Parity, the company that built Substrate, they've built blockchains before for other companies, other purposes, and they realized that they were reinventing the wheel a lot. They were rebuilding these things over and over again, the database layer, the networking layer, the consensus engine, transaction queue, and so on. So rather than continue doing that, they decided, let's abstract that away, let's make it a common and easily reusable package, and let's build our future stuff on this common thing that we've extracted, and make this thing desirable to the community so everybody starts building on it, so that we have a battle-tested base, and then we can just build on top of it. And that's basically Substrate. It's an open source modular framework for building your own blockchain. It has a library of runtime modules that are basically plug and play. So you just pull them into your you pull them into your chain as you wish, and you put these functionalities together. This is an example. So you have here the so every chain has a runtime, right? And the runtime is just a rule for how to get from block A to block B. So this just defines the rules on how you build new blocks in the chain. And this runtime is can be composed of different units in Substrate, of different palettes. So we call these Rust modules palettes. This is all Rust language. So generally you would be calling them modules. In Substrate lingo, those are palettes. And these palettes are a part of a bigger ecosystem called Frame. So these are Frame palettes. You don't have to bother with the terminology. So anyway, if you imagine the upper circle, the runtime thing, as a runtime of a Substrate chain, you can see that it has these modules, these palettes that are marked with the pink border in the table below. Those are in the circle above. What this means is that from this list of palettes below, and this is not a full list, these are just some of them. But from this list, we picked a few of these palettes to put together into the runtime and compose a chain with specific functionality. So this chain that has our runtime above has the system palette, which is useful for things like block number and just basic system functionality. Almost every chain is going to have this, and actually every chain is going to have this. BAID for block production, grandpup for block finalization, indices, so you can have short human-friendly identifiers for addresses on chain. So these are like, instead of a long string of letters and numbers, you would have maybe 4 or 5 letters and numbers that are equally unique. Almost equally unique to the long address, so that you can just give those to somebody and they can send you money through that index. the timestamp, the balances, all pretty self-explanatory. And then there's the sudo module, which is basically your administrator module for that chain, which lets a single key, a single address, a single user have administrative ownership over the account. And that user can then do some things that regular users cannot. For example, that user can command the balances module to transfer money from one account to the other account without owning either of those accounts. So these are admin functions that you would usually use when you're building a chain, when you're in the very, very in the initial phases, and when you're not yet sure that everything's going to go the way you want it to go. So you want this debuggability in there. The magic of Substrate is that you can rebuild a runtime, upgrade it, and then remove that sudo module later and decentralize your chain. So you can upgrade that and just remove a part that was there before. In essence, Substrate offers you the ability to compose runtime logic with these logic Legos, right? So you get this Substrate base that you download, and that on its own, the node template that comes with the Substrate framework is enough to run a blockchain. But you can also pull in these extra pallets and just activate them in your code, rebuild, recompile, and suddenly you have a blockchain that has all of this functionality that you needed. Like in this case, if you want on-chain governance and balances to keep track of tokens, you just pull those modules in, activate them in Substrate, build, and now you have a chain that you can send to your friends or whoever you want to run your node, and suddenly the nodes will find each other if they have the common boot node through which they can find each other, and you suddenly have a blockchain, a private blockchain that you can then expand as you wish. And this can all be done within like an hour. We actually have plenty of podcasts doing exactly that. So there's one that builds a proof of existence blockchain on this Crowdcast channel. So just look through the archives of the videos. There's one that builds a proof of existence chain in like half an hour and a custom UI for it. I think I also do a forkless upgrade, which I'll explain next in it. So that's very interesting. And there's one video where Nicole from Parity does, I think, a Bitcoin chain clone in Substrate. So you basically build Bitcoin in Substrate. That's how versatile it is. So this is how you basically build chains with Substrate, right? You want your chain, you want to get rid of the long and arduous process of developing these network connections and these database layers and all of the stuff that's actually common to all blockchains. You get that out of the way and you focus right on the logic. You go right to the meat of things. You develop your chain for the application that you have in mind, and that's super powerful. But what's even more powerful is that this runtime is actually compiled into two things. It's compiled into native binaries, so that's going to be a program that you run on your computer natively, right? So like a low-level compiled code that you can execute very close to the metal, so it's going to be very quick, very efficient. But it also compiles into WebAssembly. And WebAssembly is a format of binary code that's interpretable across many different languages and runtimes. So it's like a very portable way of executable code. And why does it do this? Well, because a Substrate chain is actually able to read its own runtime from the chain itself in this WASM format. So what happens is when a Substrate chain is built, is compiled, it also saves the WASM version of its logic, of its runtime, on the chain itself. And then what happens when the nodes are running, if that runtime on the chain changes and is newer than whatever they have natively running, so the faster version, they will run the newer version. They will take the one that's on chain and run that. So your nodes will automatically upgrade without having to talk to anybody. Hey, download this new node, upgrade this new node, stop your server, reset this, rebuild this, and so on. And that's, I mean, you can imagine how difficult that is in a system where most of your participants are anonymous, right? You have a blockchain, you have no idea who's running your nodes. So by deploying this upgrade online onto the chain, your nodes will automatically download this new runtime and start running according to the rules of that runtime. And then if people decide to upgrade their native code eventually, then they just get a performance boost. No logic changes, nothing else. So if they just make the versions match, then the node will start running the native version again, the faster version. But again, if that on-chain version is newer, has a higher version, then it's going to run that one. And this is kind of how it looks, right? So you have these forkless upgrades, and these are one of the key selling points of Substrate. is that every substrate chain has this ability, every single one. And so you can imagine these little sections, like the gear and the server, they're one single machine, they're one single node, right? And now let's imagine that this node processed this block, so it's a block with runtime logic 1, and then another, and then another. So these are aware of the native code, and they're running the native, the fast version one. But then we have the WASM switch at the bottom. So in this block, we switched the WASM block, we switched the runtime logic in its WASM format for another one. And now, all of a sudden, on this block, this change happens. So this new WASM blob is consumed according to the previous native rules. And from this block on, the native rules no longer apply, but we're only running the WASM blob. And now we're running the new runtime logic in WASM format, and the nodes are grayed out, which means that the native version is not running until these nodes upgrade to their native to match the native version to the WASM version. So this is how a forklift upgrade happens. It's basically it's a car that changes its engine while it's driving. And that's why these blockchains are extremely powerful, because these changes can happen as often as you want them to. It's up to you. If you have the sudo module installed, sudo admin, you can do that single-handedly. But if you don't, if you're decentralized, there's governance. So governance is something that Kirsten touched on, and that's basically the ability to, focusing now on just this WASM upgrade, governance has the ability to change a lot of things in the chain. Like even just changing the number of validators that are allowed to participate in the chain is a governance thing. So it just flips a switch and changes the number, and that's it. But all these governance changes, they have to come from a root origin. And the root origin is either the sudo module, so the admin account, or the majority of the chain in terms of coin power. And that's basically equivalent to a sudo, right? If most of the if most of the money of the value on the chain agrees to something, then that's basically identical to an admin doing something, because that community has power over the chain. You will actually very rarely, if ever, see both governance and sudo active on a chain at the same time. Typically, sudo will be removed and then governance will be plugged in. And that's how you decentralize the chain. You remove one and you add the other. Now, governance has the caveat of needing much more time to enact a change. So they will first make a proposal. That proposal has to be seconded. Once it's seconded enough, it will turn into a referendum. Then people have to vote on this referendum. And once it's voted in, it will have a delay to enactment until it's applied. The magic here is that this upgrade will be done automatically. So the chain does it itself. You do not need human intervention, again, to do any kind of upgrade. So if you vote for a WASM upgrade, if you vote for a runtime upgrade, a runtime change, and that's voted in, once the block where it's supposed to be enacted happens, once the block occurs, that upgrade happens automatically. The WASM will just stay on chain and wait for its time to strike. And then when the block arrives, it'll just switch it out. And you have the new runtime. Right? So it's all automatic. And this is how you can govern a chain. You have this powerful democratic mechanism of voting for changes of the chain itself. You upgrade the infrastructure that you're using by using that infrastructure. And that's super powerful. This illustration is just like in third block, sudo did some kind of operation, but then in the fifth block, sudo went out and governance went in. And then in the third to last block, the governance made a decision to change something in the chain. Right? So this is super, super powerful. Now, when you will be building your substrate chains, you'll be using the node template. And the node template is a template chain that comes with Substrate that's easy to get started with. It's like something that you just power up and you already have a blockchain. You can start hacking on it. When you're building things, you will probably be building, you won't be modifying the Substrate code. Instead, you will be building a custom palette on top of everything that's there. So your custom palette will add the custom functionality, the application logic to the chain that you're building. You're not going to be modifying the template itself or the Substrate itself. You will be building a custom-made palette with custom logic that you want your chain to execute and demonstrate for the hackathon. You will be doing this through the magic of macros. What you see here is a GIF of a piece of code with comments. It's 100 lines of code, and that's a custom chain. So just 100 lines of code, including comments. And this makes a proof of existence chain. So that's a blockchain where you can store the hash of a file to prove that it existed at a point in time. And then you can reproduce that proof later. And you can also revoke that proof by deleting it from the database. This chain is literally 100 lines of code in this custom palette. So this custom palette is just a separate palette, a separate module that has this little bit of logic, but that little bit of logic gets included into the runtime circle, compiled with everything else, and becomes usable to all the users of your blockchain. And another magic of Substrate is that when you're building anything in Substrate, the Substrate build process produces metadata. And this metadata is a huge list of properties represented as a JSON file that lists everything your blockchain can do. All the errors, all the events, all the functions, all the constants, everything you've coded into the chain, if you did it right, and everything that's been coded previously for you through Substrate is exposed through this metadata. And what this lets you do is interact magically with different UIs. So user interfaces that read this metadata can configure themselves on which buttons to show you and in which format and what values they take in, because they know all this from the metadata. And I'll show you a demo, not a demo, I'll show you a screenshot of that UI, and you can test it yourself later. It's all live and open source. Another component that I have to mention is Cumulus. So this diagram was on the screen before, but essentially what it represents is the gray circle is the relay chain. So that's the master chain of the Kusama network. The pink lines inside the circle are actually messages between the different chains. And the black dots on the gray circle are slots for these parachains, for these chains to connect through. To connect your parachains, which are the pink blocks, into this relay chain, you need Cumulus. And Cumulus is a plugin for Substrate, which will let you easily connect your Substrate chain to Kusama or to Polkadot. Cumulus is still in development, so use at your own risk in this hackathon. It is not required that you connect your chain to Kusama or to a relay chain to win this hackathon. It would be fairly impressive, but it would also be needlessly difficult. So unless you feel like waiting for a stable release, it's better to just build a Substrate chain that does something awesome, because it can always be upgraded later with Cumulus to connect to a relay chain. This is polkadot.js.org/apps. You can just go to this URL, or better, kusama.apps.io for the IPFS version. And this user interface is configured to show you Kusama-specific stuff. So it's going to show you the buttons for the modules available on Kusama. If you use the top left, so this part here, click here. If you change the chain to another chain, like Edgeware, you're going to see a different interface. Some of these buttons are going to be missing, and you'll see a new one, contracts. And Edgeware is a smart contract chain where you can deploy smart contracts. So Kusama doesn't have smart contracts, Edgeware does. And through metadata, this UI is aware of this change and will show you a different UI based on that. So that's the power of this metadata that you always have access to through your Substrate node when you build it. You also have Polkadot, which is a Vue.js based. So this is an open source React based like mega thing, a huge project with every single feature you can imagine. So this is for superpower users. And you can find a lot of exciting and useful things in here. It's all written in TypeScript, and you can extract these components out with a bit of luck and use them in your project. For a bit simpler approach, you have the Polkadot system. The Polkadot is a bootstrap based on Vue.js. It's a simple dashboard with some very simple components to get you started and some very simple tutorials on this URL where you can basically find out how to build components that interact with your chain visually in the UI layer without having to, waste too much time setting up an environment for React, TypeScript, and so on. So this is just pure Vue.js, very simple stuff. Very easy to experiment with, should help you a lot with this stuff. And there's also the front-end template, which is React-based, but it's much simpler than the mega Polkadot apps. So these are very small components in a simple page. This is the URL, so github.com Substrate Developer Hub, Substrate front-end template. I can share that link later, or you can have the bit.ly link here below. So this will just provide you with rudimentary access to your blockchain. So this is just extremely basic components, but enough to use the chain, enough to send some transfers around, enough to interact with your palettes, you can see here there's a palette interactor. And if you select the type extrinsic, that means just that you're manually composing a transaction to your palette that you've built. And this is excellent for testing and for debugging. And then you can upgrade this UI even and turn it into something very specific for your own chain, so that users have only the buttons that you want them to see, not everything else that would just confuse them. So that's all I had for this part. I know it's a bit short and fast, but if you have any questions, I'm open to everything, to answering anything. And please do feel free to get in touch through any of these methods on screen. I'm always here available to help or give advice or explain something. Let me just check if there are any questions now.
Yeah, Bruno, I think we're just going to bring Urban back on and we can answer questions if there are any.
Okay.
And wrap it up.
Let me stop sharing my screen. Okay.
So if anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the Ask a Question box down here. And we can start going through those.
Oh yeah, Jam has a good hint in the chat. So if you go to Substrate Developer Hub /recipes or just substrate.dev/recipes, there's a bunch of cool recipes, tutorials for you to build. It's like from 0 to something, and you can just hijack ideas from there.
Yeah, sweet. Thank you very much, Bruno and Kirsten. This was amazing. This was perfect. I think it's very helpful for people who are just coming in the ecosystem to get that technical perspective, not just us ranting about rules and what to submit. So yeah, any questions? We've got 5-10 minutes to spare for this.
Yeah, it looks like we had a couple in here that were already answered, but is there an upper limit to how many teams can participate? So the answer to that is no.
As many as you like.
Yep. When is the last day to register for the hack? So technically, you could register the day before the submission ends, which is August 13th or 14th, but obviously better to register as early as you can.
Yeah, just to note here, it's better to register earlier because we're going to be sending out updates, and if anything changes, if anything happens, so that we can stay in touch with you. But like Dan said, you can register and submit in the same minute if you want.
Yep. And then let's see, Joran, can you only submit one project? Do you want to go through that one, Urban?
I'd have to check the rules, to be honest. I think multiple submissions are permitted, but I really have to check that in the rules. That's why we had the slide up there twice. Please read the rules.
Yeah, so you could make 2 separate submissions, but every submission, it needs to be just one project. So when you do submit that, it would be eligible for the Build a Blockchain prizes or the Open Hack prizes. If you don't, or even if you win one of those, it's only one or the other. And then you're also eligible for the Community Choice prize. And that's for every project you submit. And then Thomas asked, is it available? A technical presentation, preferred way to run the submission, and is one command on Docker.
Yeah, so preferred ways, like we explained with the submission requirements, just to be honest, just make it as easy as possible. A live, way of us interacting with the submission is better. If you choose to work on the blockchain, a Docker image is good as well. But just keep in mind, we don't want to end up in a situation where there's hundreds of submissions and we need to compile them all. That's why the guidelines on submitting a Docker image in general.
Hari is asking, is there a channel for support with the hack? So yes, there definitely is. Similar plugging into the Substrate seminar calls on Tuesdays, we're also plugging into the Substrate technical chat on Riot. You'll find, I'm trying to find that link for you now, but you'll find that link in the hacker guide. But if you give me a second, I'll paste it here in the chat.
which is actually a really good resource for anything connected to Substrate and so on, because you've got hundreds of not just developers, but also people outside of Parity and Web3 who are hanging out in there who can assist you. So these are just fantastic resources, and a huge thumbs up to the guys at Parity for organizing the Substrate seminar and keeping that technical riot alive. So it's been working out really, really good.
Cool. Any more questions?
Sweet spot. We just crossed 1 hour, so. All right. So I guess that's it. Dan, do you want to wrap it up?
Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming. Oh, there's one more question. Let's take this real quick. Substrate. I think this might be for Bruno.
Yeah, so this was in .leap recently where I warned people that even though RC4 is out, the Hackusama rules recommend using RC3. So yeah, just keep that in mind. I'm not sure what the reasoning is to recommend RC3. I guess all the resources have been updated
slightly, Bruno. So it's basically RC later. So RC4 is also definitely acceptable and probably preferred, but either one.
Okay. All right. I think we should update the description on Hackusama's page then.
Yeah, we can do that. It's absolutely. So while we were writing this, RC3 was out, and then RC4 popped up. That's why RC3 or later is all good.
Cool. All right. Well, thanks everybody for joining. Meet us in the Substrate technical chat if you have questions. The Kusama Telegram chat if you want to just find teammates or ask us any general questions. But really appreciate everyone's time on a Friday, and thanks to all the other presenters today. Everybody have a good weekend.
All right. Thank you. Bye.